Okay, Shannon, are you there?
Yes, we are here, and I was muted.
Aloha.
We are here, ready for your update, Anna. Can you hear me, Anna? I think she's got her computer turned down again.
Hello, Shannon.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, then I'll hang up.
Okay.
I was calling to talk you through how to change your volume.
No, I did change it. Is there
Oh,
anything
good.
else I need to do?
Smile, a bright, pretty smile, and give us your update for the week.
Right. Oh, well, it's been a very, very intense week. We are basically cleaning up the last of the maritime claims, and we are now going into the air jurisdiction claims. And that will prove to be rather challenging in some regards. Simply the length of the documentation and the need to read it out and do all the work with it. But that can be done in a day or two. And that is the final jurisdiction that needs to be addressed. So we are at the end of a very, 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 very long process. And the nature of the criminal activities that have been carried out, not only here, but throughout the world, are self-evident now. Many, many members of the bar associations have viewed my testimony and read the written testimony in back of it, and they are panicking. They are deep down in the soul panicking because those who knew about this realized that one of the sheep figured it out. And those that didn't know about it are getting their first glimpse of the evil that they have been involved in and that they have been implementing and benefiting from. And frankly, for many of these people, it's horrifying because they have lived their lives in the sanctimonious security of believing that they were in the right and that they were the judges and they were the purveyors of justice, law, and order. And it turns out that instead, they've been used to work a vast fraud scheme that has damaged uncounted millions of people. So I cannot imagine what that must be like for many of them, having spent 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of their lives devoted to something, thinking that they were the purveyors of justice, and finding out that they were instead the purveyors of injustice. And a similar thing is happening with the military. Here are these guys, career officers, risking their lives, doing all of these things that are exceedingly difficult to do on many levels. Work that has put an incredible stress on them physically, mentally, and emotionally, that has cost them families and cost them livelihoods and everything else you can think of, all sorts of sacrifices. And then to find out that after all this, they were just cheap mercenaries. Guys who'd been gulled into doing mercenary work for almost nothing. That must be another really rude, really hard awakening. And yet, there it is. So these two groups, the military and the Bar Association members, are having a very, very tough week. And there really isn't much that we can do for them in terms of making anything up to them. I mean, it is what it is. But we can refrain from blaming them, because by far the vast majority of them were taken in and used and abused, and they suffered in their own way and are suffering now because of the unwitting roles that they played. So I would counsel to have sympathy for the military and for the Bar Association members who are coming face to face with this and going, you know, try to put yourselves in their shoes. The military has to worry that they're going to be charged with treason, even though this was done behind their backs, and 99.9% of them never even knew that this was what was happening. The same thing with the Bar Association members and those who served as judges. Most of them had no idea that this was going on and it was being worked in this way. Most of them have a completely clean conscience. It isn't until they get up to the level of being a state Supreme Court judge that they start getting the information and really being in a position where, yeah, they reasonably do know. And so it's a small number of people who knew. And then it's a matter of exactly what did they know. I mean, I talked to a former state Supreme Court judge, or state of state Supreme Court judge, I should say, who told me that when he first took up the job, the members of the senior jurists in the state came to him and basically told him that he was doing part of this, and that we were at war and that the country was occupied, and that because there had been no peace process, that this was a measure to be taken against insurgents and all of that. And of course, he looked at that and he said, that's silly. That's ridiculous. I'm not going along with it. And so he left the Supreme Court, retired from it immediately, and went back to private practice, because he realized that this did not pencil out against reality, that this was some kind of error or fraud scheme or something unsavory was going on, and he didn't want to be part of it. But it's completely believable in some regards, and it's, well, in most of these positions, even at a relatively high level, that they thought that they were in a wartime scenario, and they actually bought this. So anyway, I know how many of you have been hurt. I've been hurt by these these jackals. We've all suffered as a result of the corruption of the courts. We've all suffered as a result of the corruption of the military. But vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. We don't know what people knew at any given point. We don't know what their motives were. We don't know if they knew that they were participating in these horrific activities. We don't know on what basis they thought they were participating, if they did know. The liars who have concocted all of this are liars, and they lied to the people that were working for them just as much as they lied to us. So let's refrain from getting all steamed up, and let's refrain from talking about treason charges, and let's refrain from talking about anything that smacks of that kind of extreme punishment that could lead to someone being killed over this, because there's already been enough death and enough maiming and enough harm done. We need to it isn't a matter of turning the other cheek. It's a matter of just practical will to do the right thing and make it the right thing. The Christian message is kind of odd, but it is in line with mathematics. You cannot fight something negative by adding more negative things to it. A -7 plus a -7 is a -14, okay? So the only way to wipe out the negative is with the positive. And that's why Jesus taught to return good for evil, because that's how you actually overcome evil. That's how you erase it. That's how you bring things back into balance. And so give these people a chance. Let them come home. Let them come to terms with what they've done, especially our military, because they've actually gone out in the field and killed people and taken part in acts of armed thievery and violence. And it weighs heavy on them. And it weighs heavier on them to know that they did this under false pretenses, that it was being done for nothing more than theft of natural resources and oppression of labor markets and other sorts of commercial objectives, and that it was nothing more than profit. It also comes as a big shock to many people, as I discovered this week, to know that mercenary warfare is still allowed by and still considered legal in the US, Russia, and the UK. The interesting part of that, of course, is that the US and the UK are corporations. They're not countries. So what you've got are two mercenary corporations voting to maintain their livelihood. And they don't get a vote because they have no sovereignty. We have sovereignty. The American states and people have sovereignty. But the US is just a corporation, and so is the UK. So you've got a situation there where they have been mistaken for countries instead of corporations, and they have maintained a vote on an issue in conflict of interest. You've got a mercenary corporation voting to let it continue mercenary operations. Now, I hate to point this out to folks, but if mercenary operations were outlawed, then we would not have the world that we've got. All of these wars that have been called wars, they're not wars. They're mercenary conflicts. They haven't been properly declared. They haven't gone through any proper peace process. When you start looking at the peace process after World War II, and also in the hidden Philippine War, that was horrendous. 15 years we fought the people of the Philippines over the Philippine Islands, and hardly anybody knows that in this country. Anyway, these peace processes were phony too. They were supposed to be land treaties, sea treaties, and air treaties ending all peace processes. And instead, what you find are things like the Treaty of Manila Bay, which turns out to be a sea treaty. And this has been going on unabated since the 1860s, where the converted U.S. cavalry that had been converted into a mercenary force was going out and signing treaties with the native nations out in the west of the United States, and they were sea treaties. They weren't land treaties, and so they had no teeth. They were just specious, deceptive things that were signed by people that had no right to sign them, and they were signed in a jurisdiction that had no meaning. So these commercial companies have been operating like this for 160 years and getting away with it. And it's been, all this bad stuff has been shoved on our good name. And everybody all around the world thinks that it's the Americans doing all these horrible things. It's the Americans being the bullies. It's the Americans who are dropping all the bombs. Well, actually, no, it's the US, and it's the US Incorporated, and they're using us as cheap mercenaries without our knowledge or consent. They're filling us full of a whole bunch of false flag BS. And as a result, we've basically been played the whole time, used as cheap mercenaries for Britain and Britain's, commercial interests. And then at the end of the day, we're getting blamed as if we did this and as if this were our grand plan and as if we were, the ones promoting all of this. And I'm here to tell you it's not. For the most part, the Americans have just been the sock puppets for these liars, for these fraud artists. And we've been under the thumb of these British commercial interests who have American business partners, of course, and these international banks, which have all been complicit in it. And so we're getting blamed for stuff that not only did we not come up with on our own and do, but we're getting socked with the bill for it. And our good name has been slandered and associated with these evils all over the globe. Every time I hear a BBC newscast, they don't say, oh, US troops, mounted the beaches in Iran. No, they say American troops. Every time they talk about this, it's always American. It's never US. That distinction is never drawn. And it's because they want to blame us. They want us to be the scapegoats. When the butcher's bill comes due and everybody's looking around to find somebody to blame, they want our names front and center to be the scapegoats, while the Brits and the US corporation just skate away in the background. Well, we're not going to put up with that. We're not going to tolerate it. We're not going to be silent. We're going to come right straight forward, and we're going to observe that every war since the Crimean War has been British. And every war since the Crimean War in the last 300 years has been promoted by banks and commercial corporations as wars for profit. In fact, the first instance that we can directly observe is the English Civil War, in which England was taken over by commercial interests. So now you're looking at 1694, and you're looking at the beginning of the British Union, is what it's called. But the British Union is not a country. It's a company called Great Britain. To be specific, the Great Britain Trading Company. And I'm sure that I am not alone, but I spent the first probably 12, 13 years of my life thinking that Great Britain was a country. No, it's not. And, just that in itself is enough to make a person sit back on their haunches and go, what's going on here? We have a lot of deceit that we have to clear up in our own minds, and then we have to explain it to all the other people around the world. They have their own examples and their own experience, and they have their own directly observable history where the same thing was done to their country in at least 60 countries that we know of. So these are countries that have been taken over by commercial corporations in the business of providing government services. These commercial corporations have, in a twisted way, competed with the actual national government and have usurped against the national governments in order to basically create more business and more profit for themselves. And you can see how this worked at the end of the American Civil War, where 2 European federal subcontractors surreptitiously took over the delegated duties and responsibilities of the American federal subcontractor, and thereby greatly extended the amount of billable work that they could charge off against us, but also gained coercive powers that they were never meant to exercise. So we have a story of over 160 years of deceit, self-service, conflict of interest, misadministration, jurisdictional manipulation, impersonation, substitution scams, all sorts of aggravated identity theft has been one of the chief problems that we've suffered. And it's finally coming out, it's finally being understood, and it's finally coming into the direct awareness of the judges and lawyers and the military. So this is serious stuff. It's very serious stuff. And everybody facing it is forced to wonder, well, what can we do about it? You know, at this late date, 160 years, how can you make up for that? How can you even begin to grapple with the crimes that have been committed, the lives that have been lost, and the lives that have been truncated and maimed and harmed by these commercial corporations being allowed to run hog wild and misrepresent themselves as the sovereign governments of entire countries? Well, first and foremost, we can stop it. Okay, the first thing is to stop the criminality. The second thing is to unravel the deceit and get back to where we should be. And the third thing is that we have to look at ways that we can deal with the fallout from all of this. Because as a result of it, we have to come up with a basis for a whole new economic and financial system, and we have to do it quickly, which is, of course, what I'm all about. And this past week, when we had we finally absolutely saw the charges, knew what was going on with Hunter, we had to admit that what we initially feared was correct, and that the Global Family Bank had been commandeered from within by Hunter and people associated with him, and that what they are doing is the old switcheroo, where they name a British Crown Corporation franchise, the same name as our bank in this case, and try to pass off their British licensed commercial bank for our chartered American International Trade Bank. This isn't going to work because we recognized what it was and what they were doing right away. It was the same old shtick, a substitution fraud scheme. And so we took action. We secured the records and the accounts and the information, the data. We shut down the Global Family Bank, the American chartered one, to avoid any confusion with the thing out there that's trying to pretend to be us. And then we ripped up the charter that we had given our Global Family Bank so that there could be no confusion about that. We have served notice, and this is something they should know, but even if they don't know, then we have to provide them with notice that public charters are not transferable without the approval of the chartering authority. And in this case, that's the Federation of States, our unincorporated Federation of States. So they can't just pretend that, oh, we gave them a public charter and now they can issue our money and our credit and wallow in it for their own delight. That's not going to work. We are looking at all sorts of issues within the Global Family Bank, the belly of the beast, so to speak, that had been built. All the computer coding, all the programming, all the software has to be routed through and tested and cleaned up, and new interfaces need to be built. New security systems need to be built because, quote Shannon, the back end of the bank looked like a swamp, a morass. And so, and it would, because everything had to be mirrored, you see. And this whole thing was, a gross betrayal on the part of Hunter. We never discussed anything but American banks. We never discussed anything but our chartered bank with him. We never suggested that we would entertain a licensed bank under British law. We have the ability to create our own commercial banks under American law, and the American Bankers Association and these other organizations that issue routing numbers and that sort of thing, are under obligation of treaty to welcome us. So what we needed to do beyond the International Trade Bank was develop our own commercial banks under American law, and then apply for a routing number to connect with the British system. And they wouldn't have been able to say no because they're under treaty obligation to say yes, at which point that would have broken their banking monopoly, and we would have been connected to the existing commercial bank system. But all of this is again predicated on the idea that we are corporations and corporate franchises that are doing banking through commercial banks, which in itself is a problem because we're not voluntarily and knowingly acting as corporate franchises. Okay, so really what needs to happen is that those banks need to go away to a large extent and only deal with actual commercial customers, while the people should have their own banks under their own laws and be doing traditional banking instead. Okay, so we have these different things that were going on at the same time, trying to end all of the impersonation and enfranchisement schemes, shut that down, build banks that are for living people, right? And then at the same time, creating commercial banks that would be under the land law and which would then be eligible to connect to all of these British commercial banks, which have created such a monopoly interest for themselves. However, we never got that far. The commercial banks, the American commercial banks, were on the drawing board, but our entire focus was always the banks for people. So we were putting our interest into the banks for people first and getting that all set up. And then secondarily, beginning the work on the American commercial banks that would have connected to the British system and been able to exert that entree via peace treaties that exist between our countries. But anyway, the American commercial banks hadn't even opened. And so Hunter, somewhere in the middle of all this, either got very, very confused, or he just jumped ship and bought into the British bull, in which case that's really deplorable. The purpose of our bank as a chartered bank, a publicly chartered bank, was twofold. The first purpose was to issue our money and credit, which only we can actually legitimately do. And the second job was to set up all these accounts for eligible Americans, people that were able and willing to stand up and say, yeah, I'm Joe Schmo, born in Poughkeepsie, New York, right? I'm a living man, and yeah, I want a living bank. I want living bank services. Okay, so we were setting up all these accounts to be able to return restitution that's owed to the living people because we paid mortgages we didn't owe. We paid property taxes we didn't owe. We paid IRS taxes we didn't owe. We paid gas and utility taxes we didn't owe. And the list goes on. And not only is that money due to be returned to us, the interest we paid on that money is something that needs to be returned to us. Also, we have an inheritance, and it is a very important inheritance that belongs to us. It does not belong to Roman municipal citizens that come from other countries. It does not belong to British subjects that are here on a temporary basis, providing essential government services. It belongs to the actual people who are either born or properly naturalized in this country as nationals of this country. Now, of course, many of the people that work for the Federal Civil Service or for the military were born or naturalized in this country, and they have a birthright. And we're not trying to deny their birthright. No, we're trying to get it through their heads that they have a birthright and they need to claim it like everybody else. The thing is that until they return from that service, until they either, time out and leave the service, or they retire from the service, they're not eligible to own land in this country until they do. Doesn't mean they can't put their claim on it. Doesn't mean they can't, claim back their birthright. They can. It just means that they have to leave foreign service before they can really come home and enjoy everything that's theirs as an American. It's a trade-off. And I know that seems kind of unfair that the men and women who are out there defending our country are in a foreign service capacity. But until that changes, and until they're an actual American national military again, they are functioning as British subjects. And British subjects cannot own land in this country. They can have land as an ownership, and it can be held in trust for them, but they cannot actually have it. They cannot possess it. So those are things that need to be looked at, especially the status of the military needs to be changed. It needs to be converted from a mercenary force into a true national military. In my opinion, I think that the mercenary activities have been the root of a lot of the evil and corruption that has plagued our entire planet for the last 250 years. And we've been ignoring it. It's as if people aren't thinking about it, but it's a very clear history once you do think about it and realize that we have been providing the cheapest and most deadly mercenary forces in the world for a long time. And so once you're aware of that mercenary status and mercenary economy, and you start thinking about some of the things that have gone on, you get a kind of a chill up your spine, and you realize, it's all these mercenary corporations that are causing all the wars. And these are all wars for profit, where, they sent people in to steal Libya's gold. They sent people in to steal Iraq's oil and its artifacts. They sent people in to bomb Iran. They sent people in to strip Gaza and remove the population in Gaza so they could set up a Mediterranean beach spa. You know, these are evil men, and these are evil commercial corporate entities that have business objectives that they want to promote and push on the world. And they just hire mercenaries to do it. And that's how we get these wars. That's how we get these terrible social conditions, because they're asset stripping other countries, and they're preventing the development of our natural resources in this country for other advantages that they see in business. And they're just sitting at the public trough, basically ruling over this country at this point. And one of the worst things that happened was that they allowed themselves the privilege of allowing corporations to make basically unlimited political campaign contributions, so that people like Mark Zuckerberg can just go in and say, buy a presidential election. That has to stop. A lot of the things that the quote unquote Congress has been doing has been as the board of trustees of a corporation, commercial corporation, and it's a foreign commercial corporation. And many of them have adopted dual citizenship with other countries, so that they're not operating as Americans while they're sitting there in what appears to be our Congress. A lot of those people in Congress have got dual citizenships in places like Ireland and Israel and Argentina, and they're not, they're British subjects with an additional citizenship in Costa Rica. What in the hell are they doing sitting in Washington, D.C., occupying chairs, supposedly acting for us? You see, it's an absolute travesty. It's a charade. It's a crime. And they've gotten away with it so long that they think that that's okay, that we accepted it, and that they have a commercial right now to continue functioning in this way, even though we're just really finding out about it, realizing what happened, and taking action. Okay, well, I've had my rant for the evening. I assume that you have some questions for me there, Shannon?
Yepers. All right, the first question. Do you have the power to fire district court personnel with only those that are working on exonerated cases?
At this point, this is still up for debate. It's still under discussion. The problem is, if we take out the district courts, then what then forms the basis for a court of mediation between the Americans and the federal employees, the federal citizenry that inhabits this country along with us. Now, the old system is that we had contemporaneous jurisdictions. So they recognized our land jurisdiction. We recognized their very limited land jurisdiction, which was the insular states, the U.S. territories and possessions. We recognized the British maritime interests, and they recognized the American maritime interests, and so on. It was sort of a parallel or in tandem system. And we had courts, just general purpose courts, that could accept indictments against federal persons, and we could have them also do presentments against Americans. That hasn't been happening since 1865. And the court that was designated to serve that kind of bridge function is the district court. So, for example, I, as a Wisconsin national, could bring suit against a federal employee in a district court. Whereas it used to be that I could bring a suit against a federal employee in any federal court. And I could also bring any complaint to my state court against a federal employee. And the grand jury of our state court would pass it on as an indictment to not the district attorney, but to an attorney who was working for the federal government, right? A U.S. attorney, and he would determine how to proceed and how to, whether to bring charges or not under their law, or to remand them to us under our law. There was two systems of law going, and it was an entirely different world. We don't have that anymore. If we want that again, we have to rebuild it. And it's not there yet. So they're saying, well, we have to have a replacement for the district court. Where's a replacement for it? You see the problem. So, my immediate suggestion is that the district court be held to land law, number one, with regard to any American appearing in district court. And number two, that the district court make plans for its own demise and start the process of migrating its personnel to American common law. Now, that would have two effects. It would guarantee that the constitutional guarantees were honored in those courts. And it would also mean that we would have American common law, and that means American public law in those courts. Right now, we don't have that. Unless, in the very exceptional case, the judges exercise their own discretion and conscience. But that's not a good career move for them. And it doesn't put any extra money in their pockets. So that's a rare day when they actually exercise their discretion and honor the constitutional obligations and guarantees. Anyway, long story short, we have to develop a replacement court system. And in the meantime, we have to both educate and ride herd on the district courts, which are presently the only way that you can bring an indictment against a federal citizen, or they can bring any kind of complaint against you.
Okay, ready for the next one?
Ready as I'm going to be.
If we don't have district courts in Canada, what do we have here?
Provincial courts. Your provincial courts are kind of an oddball combination of King's courts and Queen's courts. King's bench, Queen's bench, and they flip back and forth in my observation, depending upon the subject matter and where something has occurred or where the asset is. Most of these courts have a dual function. Some of them have more than that in terms of functions and what their officers can do. So there must be at least two functions in each provincial court. And I'm looking at them in terms of having both kind of a district function and a state function. because they do handle international cases, but they also handle things that happen within the province. It would be, it requires more study, but if you think about it, this makes sense that these would be maritime and admiralty courts in Canada, because Canada never actually had its own land jurisdiction government. Therefore, it never had its own land law. They're just now getting a land jurisdiction government organized for the first time. So having the provincial courts act entirely within maritime admiralty makes sense in Canada. But now with the as you go forward and you develop the assemblies in Canada and you have a land jurisdiction government, then you'll develop your own land law. And you'll have your own land courts.
Okay, next question. What has to happen before GFG funds will be available for us to get access? What do you expect will happen to the current banking system after GFG goes live?
Well, we're not calling it GFG anymore to prevent any confusion between us and the thing that is out there trying to impersonate us. We're going to have to come up with a new name just to make that demarcation good and solid, and so everyone can see it. We are bringing in the international authorities to prosecute Hunter for this. Even the name of the bank was nothing that he came up with. I've been using the name the Global Family Bank since 2015, and the fact that we didn't register it in their service and in their system does not mean anything. It just means it's not in their system. They don't get to infringe against a private copyright and trademark just because it's not registered. We didn't choose to give ourselves away to the Queen or the King. So, this is the kind of nonsense that has to be sorted out. I'm pretty confident in the end that they'll be destroyed and that we'll get our bank back in terms of having our name and identity and everything that we paid for and everything that we volunteered and created there. But by then, I think we'll have gone on and created an entirely different bank under a different name. And we will, at some point here, we'll probably inherit all of the maritime banks because they're all completely underwater. They're all insolvent. And it's just a matter of time until we, basically take them over and settle the hash. One of the oddball problems is that if we do that, then we have another kind of monopoly because they have established a maritime banking monopoly. If we take them over, then we're instantly going to have a land jurisdiction banking monopoly. And how do you avoid the evils of monopoly on either side? There's, ironically, that you're going to love this. We, through the Vault program, we traded Federal Reserve notes as they came into the Vault account at the Citibank side. We ledgered the AFD, the corresponding AFD and the Vault account in our bank. And they couldn't find anything else to complain about. So they were complaining that Americans were getting so much more, that the worthless Federal Reserve notes were being traded for something that had real value and that was much greater value than any kind of value that could be assigned to the Federal Reserve notes. And so they were trying to complain and say that we were running an inducement scheme. And the fact is that even with that favorable exchange rate, you were only getting about 80% of your money back that has been lost to inflation since 1913. And on top of that, they're the ones that created the exchange rate back in 1934. So they actually have nothing to say. But the big complaint that they were coming up with was that you were getting too much, you were getting too much gold in return for something that was worthless, and that it was an inequitable exchange in a reverse way. Huh. Anyway, people are strange, and a lot of people have been confused by this, but those of you who've been following along and are familiar with mirroring and how they basically set up a doppelganger of you and, set up these series of corporations and name them after you, you're already aware of how they operate and how they create these identically named British Crown franchises and try to pass these British Crown licensed banks. Well, in this case, they're trying to pass off an identically named British Crown licensed bank for an American chartered bank. They just steal everybody's identity. And so they're trying to steal the identity of the bank too. And it's nothing new. It's almost predictable. I wish it weren't. But they try to commandeer everything and turn it into British. And in this case, I don't believe it's going to work for them. I think that they're going to get slapped down for it. But that is, it's the old shtick, and they're trying to play it. Now, how long it takes, wait, how long it takes is just a matter of we have to do the software. We have to rebuild the interfaces. We have to rebuild the software to do the security. We need better security. But all of your data and your records and your accounts are still there. You just won't be able to get into a website and work with them for a couple of months, maybe a little longer. I'm waiting for my IT team to kind of square up and give me a guesstimate. But they've been working hard. I mean, it isn't that they haven't been working hard on it. They just haven't had an answer for me yet. Anyway, as soon as we get the software back up, and we'll put a new name on it, and we'll hopefully have by then settled the issue of who's who.
Rebuilding the world, one step at a time. Oh. Okay, I know you mentioned avoiding getting property at this time. I have acquired property a couple years back and have since corrected my national status. I am currently fighting a fraudulent foreclosure action lawsuit, defendant pro se. Any advice would be helpful.
Well, I'm sure your state assembly has a litigation committee that could help. Bucolic Law has an entire website that is about, finding your patent and enforcing it. We've just got a really good case in Ohio coming out where people fought a foreclosure using their patent successfully. So there's all of that. And then on top of that, in that same case, a lawyer admitted that the all capital letters entity has a specific meaning. And now they're busily trying to nail him down and make him force him to admit what that specific special meaning is on the court record. Because they always try to say, oh, well, it's the same as you, but no, it's not. And we know that. But if we can get an open court admission that it's a corporation, that will be a great validation for what we've been saying all along. Anyway, I would go to Bucolic Law. and I'd get my patent nailed down, and I would, once you get there, you'll see other people who are fighting the same kinds of things and can probably, give you some pointers and help you follow the logic of our defense.
Okay, next question. If you pull your charter with GFG, what happens to the funds we put in the vault? Will we get that returned?
The GFG, we pulled the bank charter on our American bank to avoid any crossover or confusion with the thing that Hunter has now, the licensed British bank. So right now there is no GFG. What you're seeing there is a British look-alike, sound-alike licensed bank. It's not our American chartered bank at all. We do have all the records. We do have all the accounts. So your accounts were not damaged. Your accounts were not lost. And that includes the vault information. Vault accounts are not lost. But there's a basic misunderstanding about what Hunter did. And this is, again, apparently and allegedly, innocent until proven guilty. But what's alleged is that he pilfered Federal Reserve notes out of the Citibank account. And people who are still thinking that those Federal Reserve notes are their Federal Reserve notes are going completely batshit crazy and going, no, that's not whatever happened. What happened is that when you sent Federal Reserve notes into the vault, those Federal Reserve notes were tallied in the Citibank account, and then they were transferred as numbers, right? One for one into the Global Family Bank account, into our vault as AFD. This is an exchange. It is under the exchange law, the exchange rate law that was established in 1934. So you've got the Citibank account holding FRNs here, and you've got the Global Family Vault account over here. You put in 10 FRNs and you get 10 AFD. This is an exchange. Currency for currency. And so the exchange has already taken place the moment it gets ledgered as AFD in the Global Family Bank. The Citibank FRNs were supposed to just sit there. They're no longer your FRNs. You've traded them. You are now safe on the other side and have actual money. You have something of actual value as opposed to the FRNs that have only symbolic value, right? But nonetheless, those FRNs are still sitting in the Citibank account. Okay? They no longer belong to you. They're just sitting there. And his instructions were to just leave all those Federal Reserve notes sitting in the Citibank account, let them accumulate there. And then if anybody got into a situation where all of a sudden they needed to, back out of the AFD and trade them back for the Federal Reserve notes, there'd be Federal Reserve notes waiting to reimburse them. And quite a few of you over the course of the time that we've had this have, had deaths in the family, had medical expenses, had some unforeseen thing happen, and you've been able to get Federal Reserve notes back. The AFD were taken off your vault account on one side, and they were then the Federal Reserve notes that you put in or that you thought of as having put in were discharged back to you, right? Okay, well, that was why that was there. Is just in those instances where people needed FRNs for some reason that was urgent, they were there to be able to reimburse them. And that was his instruction. But apparently he got greedy and he saw all of these Federal Reserve notes being exchanged out and just was sitting there in the account. And he thought to himself, well, they don't really belong to anybody. They've been exchanged for AFD. The federal court says that they have only symbolic value and you can't be accused of stealing them. So he starts pilfering Federal Reserve notes, that's the allegation, out of that Citibank account after they had already been exchanged for AFD. Okay. So then the rest of the allegation is that he pilfered money he pilfered Federal Reserve notes out of the Citibank account and didn't pay federal taxes on them, which led to the IRS and the DOJ going in and seizing the Citibank account and everything else that was in Hunter's name. Now, we don't know if we don't know how much he took or how much the DOJ or the IRS took or any of it. There's nothing out there yet to say that. But what we do know is that you landed safe on the other side of all this, and your money is logged in as AFD in our American Global Family Bank account. So your vault account was preserved. You have your AFD recorded. They couldn't come in and seize any of that because it's outside their jurisdiction. So you're sitting there safe and happy and pretty as a picture because you have your AFD. And all it is on the other side, all it's at issue are Federal Reserve notes that don't even belong to you anymore. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see what's going to happen. Certainly, we could make the objection to what was done because it was not anything that we authorized. It was certainly something that Hunter was doing on his own volition, and so basically, none of that has anything to do with us.
Okay, next question. Does GFG fall under common law and therefore be subject to common law court?
GFG is the American Chartered Bank, is not the GFG that is out there at this moment, okay? Our bank has always been under American public law. It has never been under British law at all. It's not a maritime bank. It's not under British maritime. It has nothing to do with that system. It's a completely American bank. And it's an international trade bank with only two functions, which I went over earlier today. So, yeah, I mean, in terms of what limited things that we needed the bank to do, it has functioned very well and it's under American public law.
Okay, next question. Can I travel outside the United States then get back in with an American state national credential only?
Well, no. When you travel outside the United States and you get trapped outside the United States, you have to bring forward, you have to go to a consulate and basically beg your way back in. And you have to, bring forward a photograph of yourself and all this other stuff. I've gone
Okay,
over
next.
that. If you go to annavonrights.com and start researching about passports and that sort of thing, you'll see instructions that are in other articles. There's, I don't know, 5 or 6 different articles about that subject, so you can get details from looking it up on the search engine.
Okay, next question. Regarding Social Security payment / retirement, how does the supplement Medicaid affect anything? Is that the same as what it owed, just an additional format?
Well, they're beefing up the Medicare and Medicaid programs as much as they can because that's giving them more money to play with. But here's the problem. Those payments are like a private pension plan that a corporation like General Motors or Exxon or Microsoft or any big corporation might owe its employees. So if you are taking those benefits, it's presumed that you're a federal employee. Now, they still owe it to you no matter what you do in terms of your jurisdiction or location once you retire. But if you're taking benefits from them before your retirement age or before your disability, then there can be issues. Then there can be questions of whether you're operating as a British subject or you're operating as an American, or, all of that can get a bit dicey. But they do owe it to you, just as any of these big corporations owe a pension to their employees after they retire. So the one thing you got to look at is, how old are you? Are you declared disabled? And if you're not retirement age and not declared disabled, what status are you in?
Okie dokie. Next question. I followed you for some time with great interest, but do not know how what you are doing in America will affect us in Europe, and if we can do something similar. I'm not a lawyer, only a person with the desire to see a change for the better. Thank you.
Well, here's the problem in Europe. When the Allies took over 17 Western European countries, they never left. They set up franchises of the USA Incorporated and put them in place on a emergency occupation basis. And then they just sat there and recruited people from the local population to act as storefronts, and they never left. What you've got functioning as your government right now is a franchise of the USA Inc. called, for example, France Incorporated. And they're just franchises like McDonald's franchises, That's how Mr. Trump could get 60 what appeared to be countries all walking out of the ICC all at once, because they were franchises. He could just pull their cord and say, okay, we're the parent company and we're leaving the oversight of the ICC. And so all of a sudden, France Incorporated and Germany Incorporated and Netherlands Incorporated and Denmark Incorporated, and all of a sudden, all these other franchises are standing right behind him like little ducks in a row, and they're all going to leave the ICC oversight. But here's the problem, folks. They're not countries. They're not even governments representing countries. They're commercial corporations, and they are precisely the entities that are subject to the ICC, which is the commercial end of the International Criminal Court. And without the oversight of the ICC, according to agreements that were made at the end of the Second World War, those corporations have to be liquidated. So you see, they're trying to flee justice. They're trying to evade action by the ICC against their corporations. And they think that they can just walk out from underneath that oversight by pretending to represent these countries. But in fact, they have no sovereign standing, and they do not have a country there. They don't have a country's government that's competent to walk out. So that's not going to work very well. And I'm glad that it isn't, because they pretend that the ICC is this globalist entity and that they're playing power politics. But you know what it's all about is that in 2024, the ICC investigated what went on in Gaza, and they condemned Benjamin Netanyahu as a war criminal. And the only thing that they got wrong was that it wasn't a war. It was a commercial mercenary conflict. So that just makes it that much worse. Doesn't change the verdict. It just makes the verdict worse. So anyway, Trump is trying to protect his friend, and perhaps he's worried that he himself will get convicted of war crimes related to the things that were done in Iran. I really don't know, but it smells of commercial corporations trying to evade judgment and trying to evade justice. They're supposed to be under the oversight of the ICC, and so far as I can see, the ICC has not been playing favorites, has not been getting into any kind of politics. They've just been following the rules and enforcing the international law that they're supposed to enforce. So I don't believe all this, fear of globalism and claims that the ICC is a globalist and blah, blah, blah. Realize that those things masquerading as governments are commercial corporations in the business of providing governmental services. And if we don't have the ICC standing over them and keeping them in line, then they will have no law but their own. And they'll just rampage around the world and do whatever the hell they like, and the rest of us will suffer until this gets resolved. So hope and pray and defend the ICC and, defend the law. Bring these corporations into submission, because if we don't do it, they're going to get away with usurping against all these national governments.
Okay, this next one's kind of a long mouthful, but I think it's right up your alley, boss. We all know that in order to improve the health of all people, animals, and plants, we have to remove heavy metals and pesticides from the air, soil, and water. Can there be an international law passed that bans all corporations from selling harmful pesticides like geosalt, Roundup, and big pharma drugs? Destroy all the HAARP weather stations, causing destructive and extreme weather conditions. Take down 5G towers, ban digital IDs, ban chemtrails, and pass laws that anyone flying an aircraft that sprays chemtrails will be shot down. Destroy and ban all data centers that are destroying the environment with its noise and excess use of water. Ban all chemicals and artificial sweeteners from embryos of unborn babies. Also ban genetically modified food in supermarkets to be properly labeled in a printable, readable size. If international laws would be enforced worldwide, it would expedite the recovery of our land, soil, air, and bring in a healthy environment for people to live in.
Well, in theory, all of that can be accomplished pretty easily. But then you have to have the enforcement in your own country that's taking up the job of enforcing those agreements and conventions. And we have not had that. The FDA has been a complete and opposite joke. Just, a money laundering facility. And it has not cared at all about what you might assume would be its job. It has not done anything to protect the public from all sorts of pollution and nastiness and false claims and everything else. So you have to have agencies or government departments, you have to have actual boots on the ground to enforce it. And that's what we haven't had, is enforcement. We've been, on the books, we've had all sorts of enforcement, but as a practical matter, nothing. Because those entities that would seem to have that kind of regulatory authority and mission have been sidelined and redirected by Congress. And so you wind up with the FBI, instead of being concerned with internal, international crimes taking place, like smuggling and human trafficking and all that sort of stuff. You have the FBI tasked with performing tax audits on somebody who happened to be a competitor of one of the cronies. You've got all of these different programs, you have all these different agencies that are supposed to already be doing all these things, but they're not. And so there has to be, first of all, there has to be the law, then there has to be the legislation, then there has to be the codification, and there has to be the assignment of what agency is responsible in order to get all of that done. Still, I think it could be done. I think it could be done rather quickly. It just needs to have the kind of backbone and focus to make it happen.
Okay, next question. Can I do anything to be free of my student loans as an ASN? I'm retired on a small income. I could not get my degree and never profited from the education I received. I applied for loan forgiveness and was denied.
I think I would appeal that denial, number one. Number two, that was probably a federally guaranteed loan. And since the entity that guaranteed it went bankrupt, that would appear to release you from any obligation. Anyway, all of that is going to get returned to you eventually here. Our whole mission is to set up the restitution account so that you can be repaid for loans of your own money to you, mortgages that you paid that you didn't owe, property taxes you paid that you didn't owe. All this stuff has to come back to you so that the money you've been paying out on that college loan all these years, they loan you your own money at interest, basically. So there will be a restitution on all of that. But in the meantime, I would just say, look, the entity that this loan is with no longer exists.
Okay, next question. If an individual who is originally from a foreign country becomes an ASN and holds no public office in their assembly, can they become dual U.S. citizen / ASN to acquire a U.S. passport? Will this harm their status as an ASN?
Well, the real question is, why don't you have an American passport? The reason you don't have an American passport is because we're not set up to do that yet. Recent findings by the Supreme Court say that You don't have to have a birth certificate or other proof of origin in order to get not a birth certificate, a passport. There are numerous ways to travel without a passport, and we are working on that end of it. But for right now, if you get a U.S. passport, the way that you sign it is controlling. So if you properly sign it, it does not affect your status as an ASN. There are articles about this at www.annavonreitz.com, and there's a search engine there, and you can plug in, information about how to make your own passport.
Okay, next question. It sounds like Hunter was almost close to completing the task of putting GFG under British Crown control. What steps are being taken to prevent this from occurring in the future, long after you and I are long gone?
Well, this crime of mirroring and impersonation has to be prosecuted. And it has to be prosecuted from a very high level. It has to be the remedy for it is pretty darned impressive. But until that is prosecuted, then what we need to do is make it impossible for them to mirror us in a licensed bank system. And we're working on that too. I don't know, I cannot envision a situation short of the complete lawful conversion, i.e. nationalization of all of these British corporations and Roman municipal corporations, that would be substantial enough and permanent enough to count as a true remedy against the impersonation that they have pulled off and all the mirroring that they've done.
Okay, next question. What screening process is being used to screen candidates to replace him? And what, never mind, you answered that one already with your answer. The next one is about people asking about funding and wider exposure for you and how to send funds to you if they think they want to.
Well, you can always send money to the Federation through the TASA website. You can send money through Paul Stramer if you tell him that it's for, the Federation or for me or specifically, however you want. You can always send a check through the mail. I have been, for the last couple of years, I haven't had a bank account, so it's best to just send a check with the pay to line blank, and then I can give it to whoever needs the money to do whatever it is they're doing. And so that's how, it becomes a gift to whoever, and you have to be prepared for the fact that, it may come back under a different name, signature or whatever, but they have played a very dirty, very hardball game with me. They've tried to drum up claims of me owing federal income taxes, for example, and they've tried to drum up charges of property taxes and all these other taxes. But I don't owe them any taxes, and they have cause to know that. And so this is coming back around to bite them in the butt. But in the meantime, I cannot hold anything in my name. And that is just the way it is for now. It's part of fighting the arsonists.
Okay. One, you're looking a little haggard, boss. You still good to keep going, or do we need to call it early?
I am haggard. It's been a long week, and it has been kind of it's been a real roller coaster. Lots of ups and downs. Lots
It's
of
only Monday, and I'm already saying one hell of a week we've had.
yes, exactly. Hopefully we'll have some more news by Thursday for the coordinator call. We are keeping our chins up and we're keeping paddling as fast as we can go. We do need to work hard to recoup the damage that's been done to the bank, both its identity and its reputation and everything else. It's so unfair that our good name is being dragged through the dirt by these traitors and these con artists. But, you know, the truth will out. The truth always wins. And it's just ours to stand here and keep asserting the truth until all of these criminals are put in their place, wherever that is.
All right, boss. Why don't we call it? You're looking pretty haggard, and we can pick this up again next week.
Yep, we'll have more news by then, and hopefully everybody will be, you know, have a good week, you know, just keep that vision of the world you want foremost in your mind and heart. Don't be distracted by all this other stuff that they kind of heap on us and try to get our attention over here about something really negative or scary. Enough. Okay, we're just going to go to our happy place. We're going to concentrate on our families. We're going to concentrate on our businesses. We're going to concentrate on the world that we want. And frankly, if they want to play criminal games and they want to have a criminal legal system and they want to have criminal governments run by commercial corporations and they want to dabble around in mercenary quote unquote wars, well, they deserve to have their banking cut. They deserve to have their personnel cut. They deserve to have their agencies destroyed. They deserve to have their corporations liquidated. They deserve to have their corporations nationalized. They deserve to have the corporate veil removed from their corporations so that they themselves, the perpetrators, the people responsible for the misdirection of these corporations, are on the hook for what these corporations have done. So that means people like Bill Gates, people like Albert Bourla, people like Mark Zuckerberg. Now, I hold the line on Elon Musk because I don't think he's done any of this. But there are a lot of people out there who've done dirt against the living people of this planet. And they need to go down together with their corporations. Okay, guys, I'll see you soon. We'll keep working. We'll keep the faith. The good guys always win in the end. All you have to do is keep on keeping on and never give up.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.